All right. Welcome, everyone. We are on another week of live Instagram snafus. And I must say, I'm very proud of myself because I'm still showing up. I'm learning a lot of new things. And don't worry, if this is a continued problem, I am absolutely not going to keep these interviews here. I'm just, our guest this evening, we're only on episode 6, so I'm still kind of playing. And so for anyone who's new to the series, this is Living a Bold Life. It's a guest interview series. And, I think out in the world right now, as we're doing so much dismantling and rebuilding, it's important to be lifting people up who are doing amazing things and let that be seen too. It's important to show that what we see on the highlight reel is the highlight reel, and it takes a lot to live a bold life and to take leaps, whether they're big or small. And so this is a way for me to use my platform with some of my favorite people that I've gotten to know over the years. The intention is to empower you, to inspire you, and to let you see that anything is possible. And I don't want to skate over the fact that some of us absolutely do have more challenging circumstances to build from. But I'm a firm believer that if we believe it's possible and we're supported, we can do it. Without further ado, we are with this evening, Patty Aluskewicz. And I'm so proud that I'm able to pronounce your last name well. I bet a lot of people do not.
I've lived with it my whole life, so it's nothing new.
And while you're going to be getting a snippet of Patty's bold journey, I'm just going to share a little bit. And Patty is the founder of Agile Mindset Consulting. She's a Scrum Master. She's an Agile Coach and Consultant and Professional Educator. With over 14 years of experience, she assists businesses and their employees in building Agile skills and successfully implementing them into their daily operations. She is passionate about helping those new to Agile learn the fundamentals for accelerated career development and progress. And Patty can be reached at Agile Mindset Consulting. And if you notice, it's right on the shirt as well. Right here. And Patty, before we get into the interview, since what I love about these interviews is I never know what my guests are going to share. Sometimes I think, I bet they're going to share this. And then they totally go left field and blow me out of the water. But before we get into the interview, I'm imagining, because Agile is something I know as a coach, I'm starting to hear more about. More of my clients are bringing this to me. I'm hearing it more in the field. If you were just to give a quick and dirty explanation for anyone who's like, what is Agile? What would maybe just be a quick rundown for anyone wondering what we're talking about when we talk about Agile?
Well, that is the big question, right? So are you talking about Agile with a capital A or Agile with a lowercase a? You didn't expect that out of left field, right?
No, I did not. I'm like, oh man. It's kind of like in coaching, right? When we're like, is that a little C commitment or a big C commitment?
Right. So let's just say Agile with a lowercase a is an adjective. It means to pivot, to be flexible, to kind of move and change with the times. Agile with a big A it's a way to do work, right? It's typically used in companies to get their teams to collaborate more and deliver what a customer is asking. So did that answer your question?
Yes. It did.
I mean, there's so much more I can say about it, but let's just kind of leave it at there. It's the ability. Yeah, just leave it.
And for anyone else who does want to know more, if you're hearing this for any of your work teams or anything, Agile Mindset Consulting, visit the website and check it out for yourself.
Thanks for the plug.
And so I'm excited because Patty, I've known you for a while, and I've known you from a lot of different circles. So I've gotten to see a lot of facets of you. So y'all, I have no idea what Patty is going to share with us this evening. So Patty, for you, knowing that you've taken a lot of bold moves, which one is the one that's resonating for you to share with our guests this evening?
I did do a lot of thinking about that. And like your guest last week, it's hard to pick just one. But I thought, let me take this in a different direction. Not a specific thing or incident or move per se, but something that we've talked about a lot over the years, finding the power to choose. So that's it in a nutshell. And since we've known each other for a long time, a lot about the obstacles that I've had to overcome over the recent years. And my challenge or hesitation with talking about these things because, there are other people involved, and I'm very committed to not talking about other people publicly. I take responsibility for my choices in life and I move forward. But, going back to, I guess, my early adulthood, which was, God, a while ago now, I started to give up my power to choose. I started to let other people make choices for me. And not like, where are we going for dinner type choices. I mean, like the things that are really transformative and milestones in your life. And slowly that just started to happen more and more until finally it's like, oh, I'm not making any choices. But at some point, like rubber hits the road and you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And you start to realize, what it took to get you there. And I got to kind of, time out here, put a stop to this. And if you don't, things start to unravel. And that's kind of what ended up happening about 6.5 years ago, where I was in my life, things just started to unravel. And it was like right before I met you, right, that this happened. And all the pieces started to kind of scatter, and I had to pick them up and start over. So this is where I found the power to choose, right? Because now I realized not choosing, which you always say is a choice, right?
Right.
And not choosing is a choice. So I guess that was my choice. But that now it was my responsibility to use an agile term, right? Inspect and adapt. How did I get here? What are the choices that I took to get there? And what do I do differently this time now that I'm starting over so I don't end up there again? And little by little, I just took that power of choice back. And it was transformative, to say the least.
I love that. Like, what I love is you just shared so much gold
Thanks.
in the first question that, like, if anyone watching this, it doesn't have a lot of time, I would be very happy for people to get what you just shared. Like, one, I love what you just did because you totally surprised me. You didn't pick a thing, right? Well, I mean, you did, but it's not like like a lot of people, like I quit my job. I moved across the country. It was, I found the power to choose. That's huge. And, so you're all like, we're one question in. And I hope what you're starting to get from this is it's never ideal when we look at our life and say, how did I get here? But most of the time it happens so slowly that you don't realize it's happening until you realize it's happening. And, so if anyone listening to this is in the place of wondering, how did I get here? I feel like things are unraveling. Keep watching, because what I know is by the end of this, you're going to have access to something different. So right out of the gate, sister, that's beautiful. Finding the power to choose, that's something some of us are never going to find on this journey, and it might not be for some of us to find. That's okay. But I love that, because my guess is that makes it a lot easier to live a bold life.
It does.
And so,
in some ways.
Right. Yes. In some ways.
It's not always easy.
No. Simple is not easy. I'm famous for saying that. Simple ain't easy.
Right.
So Patty, for you, you know, and you kind of already spoke to this, which I love, right? These interviews have all been so organic. People kind of start answering the question before we get there, which is a sign we're in flow with it.
Yeah.
So one thing you had said was, you know, things were unraveling and you kind of had to do something different. But if we look at, you know, when the rubber hit the road, when push came to shove, was there an event or was there something that's memorable for you where you were like, I have to find the power to choose for me. I've got to do something about this. Like anything memorable that came at you?
Yes, it was a moment, but I think it took me a while after that to actually do it. So let's just say I don't want to share that moment.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's a little personal.
That's okay.
But the point I'm trying to make is sometimes you have this realization and then you think, okay, what do I need to do? What do I have the courage to do? And it could be something this big. And then that this big on top of this big on top of this big, that adds up to something huge. And I think it was there was another moment, and again, this was much later, but where it was like I was forced to choose because things came kind of toppling down. And it was like I didn't have any choice anymore. You know, I look at it, and I shared this in my newsletter yesterday, as a matter of fact. It was like this huge amount of success was teetering on this house of cards. And it was just it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. One last thing that kind of tipped it over. And then everything kind of fell. And then that's where I felt relief, which I'm sure is a lot of people's experience. Like, finally, I don't have to hold this up anymore. But then the next moment is, okay, I need to pick myself up by the bootstraps and I need to start choosing. And back to the inspect and adapt, you know, this whole agile process, right? The 3 pillars of Scrum. Now we're going to get technical here. The agile with the capital A. The 3 pillars of Scrum are transparency, inspection, and adaption. And that is exactly what I did. I had to be really transparent with myself, like rewind time and figure out, okay, where did this start? And I had to inspect all those things, and it was hard. You know, just like when Agile is being performed on teams, you know, on software development teams or whatever, it is hard. But you start to have these honest conversations, and you start to realize, okay, these things did not work. I have a choice. Do I keep doing the same things again, or do I change? And as we've talked before, the change part, like rewiring those patterns in your brain, that is super hard. But once you have the courage to do it once, you could do it again and again and again, because you turn around and you're like, wow, I did this.
Right.
And it's okay.
And that's why this is called living a bold life, because most people, once they are able to kind of get into that groove, it just gets easier. Yeah. And I love what you said. I make notes so I can kind of come back to it. Because, you know, I know that as people listen, they're going to hear it in their way. But, you know, as someone who's deeply trained in active listening as a coach, you know, I like to kind of pick out the nuggets I hear in case people are missing some of the gold. But, you know, what I really hear from you is you were you had your moment. And you didn't do it right away, but you did it when you were ready. And so y'all, like, this is a really important thing, right? Because not all of us are wired to go from insight to action. Sometimes that's great, and sometimes that doesn't actually help. You know, sometimes you can get into action too fast. I'm actually working at a breakthrough in that myself. More time from insight to creation. So, you know, what I'm guessing is, you had the moment, and then you probably had to kind of bolster your courage. Because what I heard was and I love this, because, you know, you all have probably heard me say, if you don't have access to the thing, what will get you access to the thing? So your question was, what do I have the courage to do, right? You weren't like, I have to do this thing and be courageous. It was like, no, what can I do? And I love that you shared, maybe it's a little step and then another one. You all, what I can tell you, 9 times out of 10, anytime you see someone who made the big leap, there were series of little leaps that got them there. They were training. They didn't put their running shoes on and run a marathon. You missed all of their, of their walking and then running. You missed all of that. That wasn't on the highlight reel, right? So thank you for normalizing that. And then I hear that you were really forced. And I love that you said house of cards, because this is a new analogy for me. But everyone, just imagine if your house of cards never falls apart, it can sometimes be harder to be like, oh, do I move this card here, or what do I do? But sometimes if the whole house just gets knocked over, you're like, oh, I just get to rebuild from scratch. And that can sometimes be, I want to just first and foremost say it's terrifying when that happens, but it can sometimes be a more powerful way to create.
Yes. And I think, no, let me take that back. I know that this is what makes me so passionate about helping people that are starting something new.
Yes.
They're starting the foundation because I know what it's like to be on top of a rickety foundation. And I know what I guess, you don't want to say the word consequences or what happens as a result of it. If you take the time to build it piece by piece and make it really strong, like you can build so much on top of that foundation. And these are the things that are driving me to help people build their foundation, which is why, going back to the very beginning of this, it is so important that I share my story, right? Whatever I feel comfortable sharing, I need to share this because people need to hear why I'm so passionate about doing what I'm doing, because there's a huge reason behind it.
And I love that, right? Because what you and I both know is we live, we live in a culture where we've been trained to want to do it quickly, to want to compromise speed over building. And, it's really, in my opinion, and let me know if there's anything else you want to share on this, but it's really a conversation of short-term versus long-term thinking, right? Elevated thinkers who can get up here and have the eagle view, we know that if you skirt over the foundation in the beginning, you may make a ton of money doing whatever you're doing. You may be wildly successful. You may get tons of clients. You may sell tons of products, whatever it is you're doing. But it's not if, there will come a time where if you did not work on that foundation, you will notice it. There will be an impact. And what I can promise you is, if you have to go back and do that foundation work when you've already got 50 stories on top of it, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to be totally up against your stuff. And in some cases, my guess is people probably do tear it down and start from scratch. It's hard to rebuild when you have that many levels on a foundation that's poor.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm a living testament to the fact that does happen. So I can speak to it. But what it doesn't take away from me is, my knowledge, my experience, and everything. It's like I can go back to who I was, right? Before all this happened. And I'm like, I'm back to that person. Yeah. Driven. I want to see change in the world. I want to help other people. And I feel like because I don't have this teetering, that's all I can think of what to call it. I don't have to worry about balancing that. That I feel like I can now give myself to other people in the world because I don't have to worry about all that stuff that I'm trying to hold up. It takes a lot of energy to hold that up.
Yeah.
And I think and it makes me feel vulnerable to talk about this, because who the heck wants to come on in front of who knows watching this, right? And say these things. But I think it's really important because everybody goes through these struggles.
Yeah.
And all the stuff you put out there on social media or whatever it is does not tell the story behind all of that.
No, it doesn't.
It's
And
very
that's exactly
easy
why
to
we're
look at
here.
that. It's very easy to look at that and say, wow, she has so much, or whatever the takeaway is from it. But if I don't share what it took to build all that, it's really not showing who I am, and that's why I'm on this constant journey to come back to who I was. And it's important to me.
And then that's why I love the series, and I love you and every guest I've had, because what's been happening after almost every episode is, whether they're reaching out to me or they're reaching out to the person, people are getting the invitation that this is about. People are noticing where they're stopping, and that, oh gosh, if you did it, I can too, right? And thank you for being vulnerable. You're not the first one who shared some things that hadn't been shared before. And so thank you for this, and I hope that everyone watching gets what a gift this is. It's not the norm that people are out in the world talking about, hey, I did some things and they didn't work. I gave my power away, but these are the conversations we have to be having to normalize it. So we want to keep going. So we normalize support. And thank you for sharing that, because I'm a firm believer, as a coach, that coaches and consultants and anyone in the service provider field, we are better when we're trained, but we've also done the work ourselves. Because to be able to say, hey, I get it. I've been there. I know what you feel like. And you are not going to enroll me in your story that you can't do it differently, because I did, and I know you can.
Exactly.
That's powerful. When you're working with someone and they're trained well, but they don't get it, they don't get you, it really falls kind of flat, right? Like, it feels good to be gotten, but still be like, oh man, they're still not going to let me get away with it though.
And that's a huge point, because there's a lot of people that they want to do it themselves and they don't want to get help, and they'll make any excuse. I mean, human beings are excuse makers. Like, I'm not going to say like I don't do that myself. A+. The human mind will find any excuse not to do something that's really, really challenging or outside of your comfort zone. And when it comes to, I want to do this big thing, then it's like, well, you know what? I don't really need to do that. But if you hire somebody to help you, whoever that may be, or even if you can't hire, find a mentor, that person will keep you in the lane.
Yeah.
They will hold you accountable. So you stay on that journey, so you don't run off the rails and then stay off the rails.
Yeah. That's so true.
It's so important. So it's like, you don't have to hire me, you don't have to hire you, but you need to hire somebody. Right? And you have to pay for it. Like, you can't get around that.
One of my coaches told me once, I think, some of you watching probably know that I used to be the queen of do it myself. My mom actually said they were some of the first words out of my mouth. And I did not take people up on offers to support me truly until late 20s, early 30s. And, I used to revere myself for suffering and for doing it alone. And, what I love about this program is everyone on here has been normalizing the need for help. And I'll never forget when one of my coaches told me, he said, look, Jen, he said, I want you to imagine that you are like accepting the Emmy Awards for entrepreneurship or your business, right? Just imagine it. And you're at the part where they get on the stage and they thank everyone. He's like, anyone who wins an award like that, do they just get up there and say, thanks to myself, I made it happen. I got no help from anybody at all. I'm amazing. He said, no. They're thanking their parents, their family, their friends, their PR person, they're this, they're that. And, you know, when he said that, it really got me to see, like, the bigger the team in some cases, like, the more that speaks to, you know what I mean? I think you all get where I'm going with that. But it really hit home when I was like, oh my gosh, could you see if I got on the stage? And I was like, thanks to myself, I did it all alone. Never, right?
And, you know, just to kind of qualify that a little bit, you know, it is great to go out and learn new skills. I mean, continuously improving. But what we're talking about here is when you start to talk yourself out of things when they get to be quote unquote too hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when you need to call in the reserves, right?
Yes.
Because it's too easy to just give up. And I think that's what we're trying to say here.
And I agree. And finding the power to choose was a big breakthrough for me. And I would have never done that by myself.
Exactly.
You know, the data, late 20s, some high numbers of 20s into my life, and it hadn't happened. Let's be real, y'all. If it didn't happen by then, it wasn't just going to magically happen on my own, right? Like, no. So, yeah, I love that. And so, Patty, for our next question, you know, again, I use the word formula loosely. The question is, what is your formula for living a bold life and continuing to make bold moves? Now, you might not have a formula per se, but, you know, most people that are, you know, kind of living that bold life, they kind of know, like, all right, for me to keep showing up and playing this game, I know there are certain things that I need in particular to keep doing this. They might change by season. They might change based on what you're up to. But if you were just to kind of share in a nutshell for people, you know, part of that formula for you that keeps you in this conversation, that keeps you showing up this way, you know, what are some of the non-negotiables that you found to be true for you?
I think it starts with learning who you are. And that probably sounds very cliche and sounds like such a simple thing to do, but I think it takes a lot of introspection. So spending time with yourself, whatever that looks like. Both you and I are yogis, and that's kind of where the journey started for me. Many years ago, starting practice yoga, and then eventually teaching yoga. And you and I both know, and maybe some of your, I don't know who's watching this, but you know, yoga is not about. Okay, so I'm preaching to the choir in some cases. Yoga is not about bending around on a mat. It's about learning about who you are, how you handle putting yourself in difficult situations. What do you do with that? And then how do you train your mind to just go a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And it's incremental.
Yeah.
So like there's that piece of it. Again, the support piece. So finding people that will support you on your journey. And sometimes they can be, you know, friends or, you know, people close to you, but a lot of times those people love you and they're biased.
Yeah, right. They'll get on the court with you in a heartbeat and say, just stop, you're stressed out. Why do it? Because they're
trying to, they don't want to see you hurt. They don't want to see you suffer, whatever it is. Best intentions.
This came up in last week's interview too. We talked about this as well.
Best intentions. So you have to find people that are, again, going to keep you accountable and sit there and like help you through it, but also say, you know what, you're trying to talk yourself out of this. Let's kind of nudge you back on your path. And you might push against those people and they have to be able to push back, right? You know, and continuous self-improvement. So being committed. to, and I guess this goes along with the growth mindset, I can learn an infinite amount of things. And everything that I learn, even if it doesn't end up where I think it's going to take me, it will get me to the next step somehow, right? I'm interested in this. I'm going to do this, and not say, oh, well, this didn't work out. I didn't land that client or that job or whatever. But what did it do for me? And it could be something much different than you have ever expected.
Very true.
So I would say those three things.
I love that. And what I love is there's so much similarity to what each guest is saying, which I figured would happen. And it's great, right? Because we're still in a conversation out in the world that, you know, self-care is a luxury and stuff like that. So the more we normalize these things, the better. And so I love that. Like, who are you? And, you know, y'all, like, really, really dive into the deliciousness of the simplicity of it. But notice that what I found to be true for transformation is the complexity lies within the simplicity. We look for it to be so hard and so this, but it's like, just be present, get to know you. We're like, no, that couldn't be enough. And then when you actually try it, you're like, oh my goodness, this is challenging. Maybe it is enough, you know, because for you, you mentioned spend some time alone. That's not easy, particularly for introverts. Particularly if you're using your busyness as a way to hide from something that's uncomfortable, or if you're using your busyness to not have to do the thing, right?
Yeah, that happens.
I love that you also shared support, and y'all like really notice what Patty said too. It wasn't just support, it was objective support. Because trust me, I know how I can be if I'm not feeling it. And if I push back from one of my survival mechanisms, trust me, every one of my friends and family is going to say, don't tango with her. But my coach will be like, oh yeah, I'm going to step up to you, sister, because you said you wanted this, not on my watch.
Exactly.
Damn it. Yes, it's true. Right? I can't get away with anything because of you. But right, it's why we pay them the money, you know, and
right.
It's why when one of my best friends reached out and wanted me to hire her, I wouldn't do it. I was like, I am way too in your life to be able to keep this clean. It's going to get messy. No, let me refer you. And I love what you said about being committed to self-improvement. Because if we're ever going to get to a place where we can trust that the next step will emerge, there's no way we're going to get to that without continual self-improvement. For most of us, trust is something we'll build more and more and more and more. And that's definitely one where the mastery comes by practicing, right? There's no there. I magically trust everything forevermore. Like, I wish. I wish. Yeah, beautiful. And then again, you know, for this next question, the question is, where do you think you'd be if you didn't make that move? And what I really want everyone listening to get is, whether you make the move or you don't, it's okay. There's no judgment here. What the question is in service of is to get you to see there's an impact if you make the move, there's an impact if you don't. And so there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of, are you willing to be with the impact you have chosen? And it kind of comes full circle to the power of choice, right? Mm-hmm. So for you, Patty, if you did not take those baby steps to leap into finding your power to choose, where do you think you might be right now? I mean, of course we don't know, right? But just kind of the trajectory you were going on, where do you think you might be right now today?
I have no idea. I really don't. All I know, you know, as I mentioned, it's kind of like, I knew I had to make this choice. I knew that this was going to topple at some point, but it's like, because I couldn't choose at that point in my life, it happened to me anyway. So by not choosing, it still chose me, right? And it's better to make the choices and steer the direction than to let things happen to you.
Oh, you know what I love about what you just said? It reminds me of a quote that I heard when I was in my second leadership training. And they said, you know, it's not getting lost in the drift, right? Like you've got to have your oars out going. And I think a lot of times we collapse going with the flow with getting caught in the drift, and they're very different.
Yes, that is I just thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're on the same level here.
Yeah.
It's not like you're floating along. It's understanding, right? It's understanding that you're doing something, but you might get somewhere different.
Yeah. Yeah. And if this helps y'all, like what I do is I believe at this point that what I know is I don't need to be in as much action as I used to be, but the action has to be uber intentional.
Yes.
And so kind of like what Patty's sharing, when I'm in action, I then say, okay, I don't know if the result is going to directly come from this action.
Yes.
It might come out of left field and bonk me in the head and be like, whoa, where did this opportunity come from? But it's about showing up and putting that energy, you know, into the quantum field, into consciousness, into the world, and then letting it decide how it wants to come to fruition.
Yes. And, you know, using that language, it can sound very out there to people.
Yeah, it can.
Very new age, very woo-woo, very, whatever the terminology is that you want to use, it sounds very strange. Let's just say that. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is that it happens to me over and over and over and over, and I cannot explain it other than that.
Yeah. And, you know, for anyone who's new to this, anyone who does know me, the bold thing is absolutely rooted in science-based information.
Yes.
And, you know, any of the things that we talk about, you know, with Patty, with anyone else, you know, there is a big difference between new age and deep, sacred, spiritual stuff, right? And so me and Patty, like what we're talking about isn't this like new age, like I'm going to manifest a car from my couch, right? It's really about understanding a lot of the sacred teachings that have come down the lineage, you know, thousands of years, you know, and applying it to humanity, right? And if anyone does want a science-based way to understand what Patty and I are talking about, Joe Dispenza can describe some of that really well through his conversation around the quantum field and stuff. He kind of brings like the science to the woo.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Great point. Great point. Well, because that's always my concern with talking about these things. Right. You know, and I've shared this with you before. Yep. I want to talk about these things, but I don't want to come across as some like, let's just meditate and everything will work out perfectly. It's not that.
It's not true.
It's not that.
It's not
true. And for me, having these conversations like we're having now helps me put words to this stuff because it is true. It is science-based. It is human behavior-based.
Yeah. That
it is absolutely has a place out there in the workplace. We just might need to use different terminology for it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I love that you were honest, right? You didn't actually know where you were going to be.
Right.
And so what we know is you probably would have been okay because you're an amazing human, but you know, would you be where you are having this experience?
No.
My guess is if you never learned how to find the power to choose, you would probably still be noticing like, okay, my life isn't horrible, but I don't really necessarily feel like I chose any of it. And I kind of feel like
it's the same situation,
right? Yeah.
Same situation, just different players or pieces or whatever.
And I really get that because, again, I did not used to exercise the power to choose. I remember in my coaching training, someone was like, you seem like someone things happen to. And here I think they're a big old psychic and what they're really reflecting is I'm a victim. And I was like, man, you're wise. How do you know? And then I was like, oh, I'm a really big victim and everyone knows it but me. This is not a good look.
Yeah.
So I love that you shared that. And so in addition to all the amazing nuggets you have already shared, If there is a piece or a couple pieces, it might be the same thing you shared, just said again to be more potent. But if there was a piece of sage wisdom, you know, for people on their journey, you know, and again, some of you all, this might be new to you. You might be like, what are you talking about? Some of you might be like, yeah, I'm kind of starting to get into this. I love it. And some of you might be, you know, more seasoned veterans like Patty and I. But, you know, what would be the thing that you feel called to share as a piece of sage wisdom to anyone who's committing to a journey of just continuing to keep moving and to be being bold and to break up that comfort zone?
I think it's turning off the conversation in your head that's telling you not to do it. I mean, there's so many, I can say, make sure you know, the typical advice, like take one step every day, or, you know, like we said, hire people to help you or whatever. But I think it's whatever means necessary. Turn off that negative voice in your head that has been programmed there since you were probably 4, 5, 6 years old. We've talked about this, right?
Yep.
Those voices, the coping mechanisms, the behaviors that you do have been there since you were 5, 6, 7 years old. It takes a lot to undo those things, but you know, whatever means necessary, turn it off. And I don't mean like drinking or doing drugs. Like
Right,
that's not,
right.
that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm saying you need to sit with the personal work that you need to do in order to undo that stuff. And it is incremental. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it takes years. Find people that will help you on that journey.
I love that.
Keep you on track.
You know, is, you know, the shitty committee, the gremlins, whatever we want to call them, they are what gets in the way. And, you know, for anyone, you know, listening, if you've been trying to no avail to turn the voices off, remember that when we try the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results, it literally is the definition of insanity. So try something new, you know,
and make yourself do it.
Yeah. Try something new, you know, and, you know how to contact me, you know how to contact Patty. If you need an accountability buddy, just to say, hey, I put a declaration out there, you know, if you need to declare it, because what I know to be true is if you say it to yourself, you're never going to make it as powerful as if you say, hey, you over there, you know, hey, energy around me. Like, I am going to declare I am going to do this. It's so much more reliable that it's actually going to happen.
Yes. And it's great that you bring that up, because you can say it to people personally. I will go on in my email newsletter and say, I'm doing this. And I don't know who's read it, right? Or, you know, going on my video and say, I'm going to do this, or social media, I'm going to do this. And sometimes I'm very scared to do that because I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. But you know, people are watching. So it makes these invisible eyes on you, right? And you know that they're all holding you accountable.
You know,
and sometimes that's all you need.
And what a lot of people don't realize is, you know, declaring is a tool to actually fulfill. If there's no declaration, what is there to do? And I love what that we actually started with finding the power to choose. Because what I really want to, the nugget I want to drive home, and it might leave some of you, you know, like, oh, I want to know more, and I'm not going to give you all of it tonight, y'all. But consider that it all starts with making a powerful choice. And many of you who think you're choosing and you're not getting the result, I want to tell you with so much love, you're not choosing. You do not have both feet in. You're reserving the right to back up on your choice when it's convenient. Yeah. And what I know to be true in my line of work is most human beings who think they're choosing aren't powerfully choosing.
Yes. Yes. And sometimes, and we always talk about hiring people and you have to pay people. Sometimes you got to put your money where your mouth is.
I would never be where I am right now if I did not hire my first coach, ever.
Because if you don't put some money on the table, then it's like there's an excuse not to do it.
Well, and if the money stretches you, you show up in a way you never would if the money didn't stretch you, right?
It makes you do it.
Yeah, it's like, well, man, if your budget is that stretched, you're going to show up for those sessions and put the work in a way that you never would if the money was just flowing and easy.
Yes. And I don't want to say that to make people make irresponsible financial choices. But I do want to say that for me, that's what sometimes puts me over the top there.
Well, and for some of us, if we never do that thing, we never get the money breakthrough. I can say for me,
Yeah.
Part of what started breaking up my money story was being willing to invest in myself on that level.
Yeah.
To be able to do the things I've done with the budget I used to have at a nonprofit.
Yeah.
I needed to learn that my truth about money wasn't the truth about money.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. Patty.
But yes.
Thank you for so much gold in this. What I love is people could listen to the whole thing or snippets of it, and they're going to get what they need from this.
Yeah.
You were so generous. You were so vulnerable. Thank you for sharing part of your story. And for anyone who is watching this, I'm going to be posting this video to multiple platforms. So wherever you are with this video, remember that sharing means caring. I would not have found half the resources I have found if people didn't say, hey, Jen, this is up your alley, or hey, Jen, you're really in it. I think you need to listen to this right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. I can't tell you how much these videos are helping people who want to make the bold moves. So think about your posse in mind and share. And you all know how to get a hold of me. You all know how to get a hold of Patty. And thank you so much, Patty.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes. And I'm just going to hit stop recording, and then you and I can say goodbye before we get off too.
Sure.